Have you ever noticed those people who watch every story, read every post, but never share anything themselves? While everyone assumes they're insecure or hiding something, neuroscience reveals the exact opposite. Scientists studying brain scans discovered that people who do not post on social media have dopamine pathways that look completely different from everyone else, and what they found will change how you see social media forever. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal the psychological traits that define people who don't post on social media, the neuroscience behind why their brains work differently, and what this means for your own mental health and relationships. Because whether you're someone who posts everything or someone who stays silent, understanding this psychology will completely change how you see yourself, your friends, and the entire performance culture we're all swimming in. So, let's start with the most misunderstood trait, the one that reveals why silence is actually a sign of strength, not weakness. Deeply introspective and observant. People who don't post use social media as a mirror for understanding rather than being understood. They possess what psychologists call an introspective orientation, a tendency to observe their own inner thoughts and the behavior of others before taking action. They notice small details others miss, the tone of a caption, the subtle change in someone's posting frequency, the patterns in online behavior. For them, social media isn't about validation or self-promotion. It's a tool for reflection. They scroll not to compete, but to quietly study human nature. Think about this person in your life. They're the thoughtful friend who remembers what you said 3 months ago, the one who asks deep questions instead of making small talk. Their online silence is simply an extension of their reflective nature. To them, posting impulsively feels unnatural. They'd rather understand a thing fully than contribute noise to it. Their quietness doesn't mean indifference. It's a sign of deep awareness. But introspection is just one piece of the puzzle. The second trait goes even deeper. It's about what they value more than popularity, value privacy and authenticity. Overperformance. In an era where oversharing is normalized, choosing privacy is almost rebellious. Research in personality psychology shows that people who are more self-secure and less approval seekers often feel no need to post about their lives. Their self-esteem isn't tied to likes, comments, or digital validation. They might scroll because they enjoy information or connection, but they stay quiet because they value boundaries. They don't feel the urge to prove anything. Many of them find social media exhausting because they can sense how easily it pulls people into performance, crafting ideal versions of themselves instead of showing reality. Their silence is their way of saying, "My peace of mind matters more than your perception of me." And here's what's important to understand. This isn't antisocial behavior. It's emotional intelligence. These individuals understand that real life happens offline, and they refuse to participate in the charade of curated perfection. Now, here's where it gets interesting from a neuroscience perspective. Emotionally secure and self-aware. Sharing fewer posts on social media often signals stable self-esteem. These people don't seek attention to feel valuable. Their confidence exists without online approval. According to psychologists, this emotional security reduces anxiety and dependence on others' opinions. They invest their time in real experiences rather than digital performance. They already feel complete. They don't post selfies to prove their worth because their sense of self isn't contingent on external validation. Here's the neuroscience behind this. Social media triggers the same dopamine response as addictive substances. Every like, comment, and share creates a feedback loop that can alter brain chemistry. It's not an exaggeration to say your brain on social media looks like your brain on cocaine. People who don't post avoid this dopamine loop entirely. Their brains aren't being hijacked by the constant need for validation hits. They're maintaining healthier dopamine regulation by not becoming dependent on external validation for neurochemical rewards. But not everyone who stays silent does so from a place of strength. For some, there's a different story. Social anxiety or social fatigue. the protective silence. Not all silent scrollers are quiet by choice. For some, silence is a shield. Social media can be intimidating, especially for people who fear being judged, misunderstood, or ignored. The online world amplifies the pressure to say the right thing, look perfect, and avoid backlash. Psychologists call this social comparison fatigue. Even if they don't consciously compare, repeated exposure to others' curated lives can trigger self-doubt. They start to think, everyone else seems happier than me. What if no one likes what I post? What's the point of commenting? No one cares. And I want to be clear about something here. Their silence is an act of emotional self-preservation. They instinctively know that constant exposure and engagement drain them, so they observe quietly instead. This kind of withdrawal isn't necessarily negative. Many psychologists say that silence can be a healthy boundary, a way of protecting one's mental space in an overstimulating world. Research shows that limiting social media use to just 15 to 30 minutes per day can improve stress, anxiety, depression, and body image concerns. There's a direct link between decreasing social media usage and improvements in depression and loneliness. So, for some people, staying silent isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Beyond emotional protection, there's another fascinating dimension to these silent observers: naturally analytical and curious. Some people scroll endlessly not for social reasons, but for mental stimulation. They enjoy absorbing information, learning, and exploring trends. Their social media use mirrors how curious people consume knowledge, selectively, privately, and with focus. They're not there to post photos or make small talk. They're there to analyze. From a psychological perspective, this reflects cognitive openness, a trait linked with curiosity and independent thinking. These individuals don't take information at face value. They prefer to gather data, cross-check, and form their own conclusions. They may even view social media as a living lab for understanding modern behavior. They're modern-day anthropologists, studying society from the shadows. You can usually recognize them in conversation. They'll mention a video, article, or comment thread they read in detail, but you'll never find their own name anywhere in the discussion. While others argue online, they're silently connecting dots, observing how ideas evolve, and watching the crowd psychology unfold. And this brings us to perhaps the most powerful trait of all. Prefer real connection. Over digital validation, silent scrollers often have a simple truth guiding them. They prefer real connection to digital performance. They might browse social media to stay informed or entertained, but they draw the line at performative interaction. Liking, commenting, or posting can feel hollow. Instead, they'd rather text someone privately, call a friend, or talk in person. They understand something many overlook. Social media often creates the illusion of connection without the substance of it. Psychologists describe this as the difference between belonging and attention. Online, people chase attention, likes, followers, views. But real belonging requires vulnerability and reciprocity, which are harder to achieve through screens. Silent users often reject the performative layer. They'd rather observe quietly and engage meaningfully in smaller, authentic ways. Their silence isn't social avoidance, it's a quiet rebellion against superficial connection. They understand that real relationships grow in presence, not pixels. One person put it perfectly: "If I want my friends to see a picture, I just send it to them." Another said, "It used to be about sharing with friends. Now it's about showing off for strangers." The brain science behind the silence. Let me take you deeper into what's happening neurologically. Neuroimaging studies provide evidence that the brain relies on social comparison when processing rewarding information. The ventral striatum, a key region involved in reward processing, shows heightened activity during social comparison. Social media amplifies this natural tendency to toxic levels. Emotionally charged content, particularly outrage-inducing posts, increases coupling between the amygdala, your emotion center, and the prefrontal cortex, your decision-making center. This creates heightened emotional reactivity. You're literally being neurologically manipulated. People who recognize this mechanism and choose not to post are demonstrating advanced emotional intelligence. They're aware of the digital illusion and consciously protect their peace by staying low-key. Their happiness doesn't depend on how people react. It comes from within. The core problems they're avoiding. So what are these silent observers protecting themselves from? Let me identify the deeper problems. First, the performance anxiety epidemic. Social media has created a culture where people feel constant pressure to present a perfect version of themselves. This performance anxiety leads to chronic stress, imposter syndrome, and emotional exhaustion. The loss of authenticity. When life becomes a series of moments curated for an audience, people lose touch with genuine experience. They start living for the photo, the caption, the reaction, rather than for the moment itself. Third, the social comparison trap. Constant exposure to others' highlight reels creates a distorted reality where everyone else seems happier, more successful, and more fulfilled. This comparison trap damages self-esteem and creates chronic dissatisfaction. Fourth, cognitive overload and what researchers call brain rot, emotional desensitization, cognitive overload, and a negative self-concept. The brain becomes overstimulated and undernourished. Fifth, the dopamine dependency crisis. When self-worth becomes tied to likes and validation, people develop a neurochemical dependency on social media. This creates anxiety, depression, and a fragile sense of self. And finally, the illusion of connection. Social media promises connection, but often delivers isolation. The more time people spend performing online, the less time they spend in genuine, vulnerable, reciprocal relationships. What we can learn from the silent ones. So, what can we learn from people who don't post? How can we protect our mental health in the digital age? First, practice mindful observation without judgment. When you scroll, notice what emotions certain posts trigger. Curiosity, envy, inspiration, anger. That awareness alone builds emotional intelligence. This is mindfulness meditation applied to digital consumption. It creates a psychological distance between stimulus and response, giving you control over your emotional reactions. Second, engage when it matters, not out of obligation. You don't have to post daily to have a meaningful presence. Share something when it genuinely matters to you, when you have something valuable to contribute, when you want to celebrate something real, or when you want to connect authentically. Let your posts be intentional rather than performative. Third, set digital boundaries and reclaim your attention. Choose when and how long you'll scroll, so you control your attention rather than the algorithm controlling you. Set specific times for social media use, 15 to 30 minutes per day maximum. Use app timers, turn off notifications, and create physical barriers. This is cognitive behavioral therapy applied to digital habits. Fourth, balance input with output. For every hour of consumption, spend some time creating, not necessarily posting, but journaling, learning, pursuing hobbies offline, or engaging in face-to-face conversations. Take regular social media breaks. This restores balance to your brain's reward system. Fifth, cultivate inner security through self-awareness. Develop a practice of self-reflection that doesn't depend on external validation. This could be journaling, therapy, meditation, or simply regular check-ins with yourself about your values, goals, and emotional state. Build your self-worth on things you can control: your character, your growth, your relationships, your contributions. This is the foundation of psychological resilience. Sixth, prioritize real connection over digital performance. Invest in relationships that require presence, vulnerability, and reciprocity. Call friends instead of commenting on their posts. Meet in person instead of messaging. Have deep conversations instead of exchanging reactions. Build a life so rich offline that you don't need to broadcast it online. And finally, practice what Buddhism calls right speech in digital spaces. Let your words and posts be truthful, kind, and purposeful. Before you post, comment, or share, ask yourself, is this true? Is this kind? Is this necessary? If the answer to any of these is no, choose silence. This transforms silence from passive withdrawal to active wisdom. Closing, here's what I want you to understand. The people who don't post their lives aren't missing out. They're not antisocial, insecure, or hiding. They're selectively social. They're deep thinkers rather than performers. They're self-contained rather than approval-seeking. They're curious but cautious. They're emotionally intelligent but easily overstimulated. They've intuitively understood something that research is only now confirming, that the online world can be shallow and exhausting, and that instead of being swept up in it, they choose to remain mindful observers. Whether you're someone who posts everything or someone who stays silent, there's no single right way to use social media. The key is awareness. Are you using it intentionally, or is it using you? Are you protecting your mental health, or sacrificing it for validation? Are you building real connections, or performing for an audience? So here's the question I want to leave you with. What would change in your life if you stopped performing and started being present? What would you discover about yourself if your self-worth didn't depend on likes? And what kind of connections could you build if you invested in presence instead of pixels? In Buddhism, there's a concept called right speech, the idea that words should be truthful, kind, and purposeful. Many silent social media users intuitively live by this. They sense that not every opinion needs to be expressed, and that silence, when rooted in awareness, can be more powerful than noise. They aren't hiding. They're choosing presence over performance. And maybe that's something the rest of us can learn from, because the quiet ones aren't missing out. They're simply watching the world scroll by, reflecting, learning, and living life on their own terms. Offline, where real connection still matters most. This is Humans. Thanks for watching.